Today, our show is about your inner magnificence. And every single one of us has that inner magnificence that we don't often really tap into, or we just don't acknowledge it, or we don't believe it. So, I have a wonderful guest with us, Bary Fleet, who wrote this book that I just finished reading. It's called Move into Your Magnificence 101 Invitations to a Life of Passion and Joy, which we all want. And this is by Dr. Bary Fleet. So I'm going to let him tell you a little bit about himself as we start, because I think that's a great way to begin. Bary, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Tell us a little bit about your background.
Hi, Maury. Thanks for having me. So I've spent 40 years off and on as a church pastor. I've been a faculty member at the School of Theology as an adjunct at Emory University. Spent almost 30 years at Bryant University, Johnson Wales University, teaching in theology, teaching in leadership, teaching in psychology, teaching in sociology. And that's me.
Yes. And you've kind of evolved, as I read in your introduction, you've kind of evolved through religion to a very different form of religion than your beginning one of Methodist. So kind of share with us that, because we're on the campus of the University of California, Irvine. People are searching for who they are and what they believe in. And then, of course, we have people driving by and people listening in. And I think we all wonder, like, what is this life all about? What is God? What is all this? So I thought your evolution was really fascinating. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. I was born into the Methodist Church. Our house actually was on one side of the church and the parsonage was on the other side of the church. My parents were very involved, and so I literally grew up in the church. Ours was the family, when the church doors opened, we were the ones that unlocked the doors, and we were there until the very last person left so we could lock up afterwards.
Wow.
That's deep in the fiber of my being. But I was a kid that had lots of questions. A lot of things didn't make sense to me. And the best answer I was given was, well, you just have to take it on faith. And that wasn't good enough for me.
Yeah.
So I found a book a long time ago called The Christian Agnostic. And basically the idea is, well, whatever you don't understand, just put that in a file drawer that says, I don't understand this yet. And that was very helpful. But then over the course of the years, I had some issues with the United Methodist doctrine. And actually it's painful now to watch as an outsider the struggle they're going through over the issue of homosexuality and how homosexuals fit or don't fit into the church. So I was called to the United Church of Christ, spent another 20 years with them. But all the while, my sense of God seemed to be bigger than the doctrine allowed for. So I retired from the United Church of Christ and found Centers for Spiritual Living, which helped me put all the pieces together. And my understanding is that God is love. God is everything there is. And that just really resonated with me. And so it helped me expand into something that felt comfortable. So that's where I am today, where there is no place where God is not. It's a life force, and the nature of that force is love and goodness and beauty and joy and peace and all of those wonderful qualities that we all want to experience.
Exactly. And if we think about all the great masters like Jesus, like Buddha, like Muhammad, all of them talked about that God is within, right? All of them
Right.
really did that. And I don't know where we're like putting God outside there, but that is, we are one. And you talk in your book about your inner magnificence is really your connection, the God within you, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I intentionally used those words because I wanted to appeal to people that might not think of themselves as religious or spiritual. So it's sort of my way of being bilingual. I can talk to people who are religious and people who aren't, and use the same language and be heard and understood. So that's where that came from. And I have some wonderful Christian friends who really have begged me to call it the Holy Spirit.
Yeah.
And it's okay for them to call it the Holy Spirit if that works for them. But I like words that are more inclusive.
Right. I mean, whether you call God, spirit, nature,
Right,
power, one source, right?
right,
It's
right.
it's really all the same thing, for us to think that all everything on this planet is made, that there's one God that made the Muslims, there's another God that made the Jewish people, there's another. I mean, come on, they'd be
Yeah,
fighting if there were so many of them, right?
right, right. Yeah, yeah.
So there is really that one source that we unfortunately don't recall, or we aren't necessarily taught. We're taught that we're separate when really we're all one, right?
Yes, yes. It's about how we are alike instead of how we're different.
Yes, yes. In this book, I really love that you have really short little vignettes that you talk about things in your life and other people's lives, and then at the end, each one is an invitation to think about it for your own life, which I really, really enjoy it, because sometimes you have to sit down and you have to keep reading and reading and reading, but you can do this 5 minutes at a time, or keep it by your bed or by your bathtub, or by your toilet, whatever, and just
Exactly.
and just read a little bit, and then sit down and think about what the invitation is. So tell me, how is it that you decided to write this book in the way you wrote it?
So when I was a pastor, I would write the front cover of the newsletter every week, and it would be a tease for whatever the Sunday lesson was going to be. And I would always end with, "I'll be looking for you Sunday."
That was your
And
invitation, right?
that was my invitation. And when I retired, I realized I missed writing. So I started writing just for myself. But the thing that I liked about the newsletter cover was it had to be confined. I had to be limited to that space. So I tried to, in doing my writing, I tried to limit myself. I did limit myself to one page. And if it didn't fit on one page, then I had to edit it down.
Right.
And uh, and then I realized I missed having a tagline at the end. Um,
You can't
and
invite them to a service that you're not doing.
exactly, exactly. So it kind of evolved to, as you say, this story, this vignette, with an invitation to do something, with a guarantee that the extent to which you accept my invitation is the extent to which you'll be able to say, "I feel good about being me." And you're right. This isn't a book you sit down and read from beginning to end. Jokingly, I've been told it makes good bathroom reading.
Yeah.
It's a,
And I think, when you read one of these vignettes and then you think about your own life, it gives you time to pause and
right.
time to think about it, because I think some of these things have to kind of seep in where, where you have an invitation to kind of think about, oh, where am I like that in my life? Now, I remember, because I attend an in spirit service all the time, every Sunday myself. And I know there was a song that we always teach the little kids. It goes, I have such a terrible voice. I hate to do this. But, I love myself the way I am. There's nothing I need to change. That song, I'm
Right.
sure you know it.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think, we don't learn to love ourselves. A lot of times we grow up without perfect parents, without perfect teachers, without perfect friends, and we get criticized, and then we don't feel good about ourselves. So sometimes it's really hard to get over that and to love yourself. What do you think about that?
So um, when we're two, we know we're magnificent. We put a towel around our neck and we're Superman or Superwoman,
Yeah.
and we can do anything. But the University of Iowa did a study. The average 2-year-old hears the word no over 400 times a day.
That's why they say no so much, right?
Exactly. But when you think about what they're doing, they're just being the average 2-year-old, and they're being themselves and they're exploring life. But when you keep getting the message, no, no, you start to think that there's something wrong with you. And that happens in little ways, and it happens sometimes in big ways. And that magnificence that we have when we're two is still there, but it gets covered up by layers of protection because we don't want people to laugh at us. We don't want people to make fun of us.
Right.
And we even get to the point we don't want people to even really know who we are.
Right.
And in my head, there was the voice that said for a long time, but if you knew what I was really like, you wouldn't like me.
Right. Right.
And I think there are a lot of us that are living like that. We're hiding who we are because we don't want to get hurt anymore.
We don't feel good enough, right? We
We
don't
don't.
we don't feel good enough. And I think there's so many of us that have that feeling within inside. And then people say, if you say you have to love yourself, then some people say, oh my gosh, and we're not talking about narcissistic love. We're not talking about loving, and being arrogant or anything like that. When we talk
No,
about
no.
loving oneself, it's really accepting who we are as a child of God, as a child of the universe, right?
Yeah, it's just about it's okay to be me.
Yeah.
It's that simple and that difficult.
And of course, it's okay to be me, but it's okay to also want to be better, right? And
Well,
want to learn and want to grow. And, the other thing is we always, all of us make mistakes. And we can forgive ourselves and say, okay, what did I learn from that?
right. And in my book, Moving to Your Magnificence, I have a section that says there's no such thing as a mistake. There are only lessons.
Right.
Um, and so instead of casting it in the negative light of, oh, what an awful mistake I made, it's what a wonderful opportunity to learn something and to do life different and to do it better
Right.
and to live with more joy.
And
So
sometimes we we have the same lesson over and over until we get it. It's like Groundhog Day, right?
it absolutely is. It is.
And I tell my clients in mediation, especially divorce mediation, I go, well, if you don't change now, the next guy or the next gal, they're gonna have a different face, different body, different name, but the same issues are gonna come up because 50% of that is you. So you need to go within and learn the lesson from this. What is it in me that really helped to make some challenges in this marriage or whatever? But yeah, so people say, well, just, and I have some people say, well, that's just the way I am. I'm hot-headed. And I go, and I think to myself, that isn't about accepting yourself the way you are. That's about not being conscious or mindful, right?
Right. And a long time ago, I read about a book that says that life brings us the people that we need to grow.
Right.
And I think marriage does that especially. And the
Yes.
people that we're attracted to are the people that life knows that we need to sort of smooth off the rough edges and to help us get in touch with more of our real self.
Right.
And in your business, I know that you've seen people who've been in multiple marriages. They marry the same person over and over again. It's just with a different name and a different face, but
Right.
it's the same stuff.
Yep. And that's that lesson that we keep repeating. That's why one of my favorite movies is Groundhog Day,
Uh-huh.
because he keeps doing the same stuff until he gets it right. And then, of course, when he gets it right, he's happy, he's talented, he's got the girl, right?
Right. Right.
Yeah, and I love that movie because I think it's such a spiritual movie about really questioning what is it in me that needs to grow, not what needs to change necessarily, like I'm bad, but even at my age and your age, that we can always grow, we can always learn, right?
And I think that's part of human nature. And I think that's part of our magnificence is that we there's always room to grow. There's always room to learn. there's always room to expand.
Yes.
And when we stop doing that is when life stops being joyful.
Right.
It just
Yeah.
gets routine
Yeah.
and empty.
And it's not healthy for us, for our brains either, to stop learning and keep doing the same habits over and over again. We're miserable, and it's not good for our brain.
Not
So
good for our brains or our bodies.
our brains are our bodies, right? Well, also, magnificence really comes in with leadership. I know you do leadership training, and I do leadership training, and I teach, law enforcement and other attorneys. I'm a certified trainer. And when people are leaders, what makes a good leader? Let's talk about that using your magnificence. And again, if my audience wants to see this book again, it's Move Into Your Magnificence, 101 Invitations to a Life of Passion and Joy. And we're talking with Dr. Bary Fleet right now. So let's talk about magnificence in the area of leadership.
So there are a couple of things that come into mind. One is when I was first starting out, the very first leadership course I took, I got exposed to what's called the monkey theory of management. And what that means is when you're a leader, when you're a supervisor, and somebody comes to you with a problem, a monkey on their back, when they leave you, be sure the monkey's still on their back.
Right.
Because sometimes some of us are real fix-it persons, and anytime somebody has a problem, we're going to fix it for them. And what we do is we deny that person the opportunity to learn and grow and to get in touch with the lesson they need. So I think that's one of the important things about leadership is the delegating and letting people do what they're capable of doing, helping them have the resources they need, but fundamentally, it's their job to do, it's their problem to solve.
Right, because when you're a leader, you're like a teacher, and a teacher wants to help people to grow, right? So if
Right.
someone comes to you and said, "Oh gosh, I can't stand working with that guy. Move me to a different department." And then you say, "Okay, so what part of that is you?
Yeah.
What is the issue? If you were sitting in my shoes, what would you tell me?" Kind of like engage them in that kind of a process so that they come up with it. I know for me in mediation, people come and they expect me to fix everything, solve the problem. And I go, look, the answer to the problem is in the problem. And you
Right.
guys know it better than me. So I'm here to just ask you good questions. I'm here to help you get creative. I'm here to have you stop fighting. I'm here to have you focus on solutions. So,
Yeah.
that's my job. My job is not to solve it,
Right. Right. It's their problem.
Yeah,
And
and
they're the
they know
ones
the
that have to
problem
come up with
best,
a
and they know
solution.
the facts, and they know everything. And sometimes they look at me like, "Well, why can't you solve it?" Or especially when I do divorce mediation, they want to complain about the other side, and I go, "Okay, so what do you think you should do about it?"
Right. Right. Yeah. And I think that's another part of leadership and relationship is we listen to a point, and then there comes a point where it's time to act. And just continuing to listen to the complaint doesn't help anybody.
Right.
So yeah, great question. So what are you going to
People will
do about
tell
it?
me, they'll say, "I don't want this, and I don't want that, and I don't want this." I go, "Okay, I understand what you don't want. Tell me what you do want."
Right.
And then they're kind of
Right.
stuck. Like
Yeah.
they haven't thought about it. They thought only about what they don't want, right?
Right.
Drives me
Uh,
crazy.
yeah. There's a piece in my book where I use the analogy of sailing. And when I'm in a sailboat, you tell me where you don't want to go. Well, there are 359 places
Right,
that I might, but you tell me where you want to go. Now, now we can go there.
right. I love that analogy because I'm a sailor too. And I remember, in fact, if you look at my logo, it's two sailboats with a dolphin over it. The dolphin's trying to keep them from colliding. And I made that up oh God, 35 years ago. But my philosophy was, you can't direct the wind, but you
Right.
sure can, you can turn your tiller and you can pull in your sheet or you can let it out or whatever.
Right.
You cannot change what's happening around you. You can't control other people. And the hardest thing is just to control yourself,
Yes,
right?
it is. Absolutely. Absolutely.
So how does magnificence help us to control ourselves and deal with, not getting into escalated conflict?
A couple of things. One is, I think and your question is great. So what can you do about it? And when I do counseling with folks, with couples, not as a lawyer, but as a therapist, asking, so what part of this problem do you own? What is
Sometimes they'll say none.
So one of the questions I like to ask is, so what's one thing that you could do that would make things 5% better? Not fix it, just just 5% better. What's one thing that you could do right now that would make things 5% better?
Right,
And that helps people do two things. One is realize they are part of the problem. They're also part of the solution.
right.
And when I can see what I can do to make things a little bit better, I realize I have power to help things change. And that's the magnificence. When we realize we have power to make things different.
Yeah. I have a funny story. I had a couple in mediation, and they were married like 65 years. If you can
Oh,
imagine
wow.
how old they were, and they decided to divorce then. It was
Oh,
crazy. Anyway, so I started out and I said, both of you are 50% responsible for the challenges in your marriage. I'm not blaming you, but you own about 50% of the challenges. And the wife turned to me and she goes, nope. He is 98% responsible for the. I knew I was going to have a problem then. But I kind of looked at her like, okay, I was trying to be even handed here. I don't say that anymore because I learned my lesson with that one. That they're
so
going to
it
be
would
out.
be interesting to ask her what the 2% is that she was responsible
Right.
for.
Yeah. Yeah. We did start talking about like, well, yeah. So that little part, what
Yeah,
part is you?
yeah,
I
yeah.
stayed too long. Anyway, yeah, it's crazy. So yeah, so being a better boss and in using your how is it that we can move into our magnificence in terms of really appreciating ourselves when we're in the workplace and things are really stressful and things are really tough? What can we do to use our magnificence to deal with all these challenges?
um, I think it goes to what in psychology is the locus of control.
Hmm.
Do I allow myself to be controlled by things outside of me,
Mm-hmm.
or do I get in touch with the things that I can control? And like with your client, so hypothetically, maybe she was right, hypothetically,
Right.
but there's 2% that she does have control over.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we look at, so what can I do differently?
Right.
As you're saying, I can't change the wind, but there are some things I can do in the midst of the wind to help me get where I want to go. And
Right.
I think looking at what we can do, and the more we do what we can do, all of a sudden we realize there's even more that we can do. So it's getting in touch with what's the little bit that I can do, and then
Right.
just do that, and that little bit then starts to grow.
And I think when you get back to your magnificence and talk about your magnificence is really your source, your God, whatever you want to call it,
Right.
your higher power, your higher intelligence, whatever it is. I think for me, when things get really stressful, I go within. I touch my heart and I ask for the magnificence within me or God within me or spirit guide me, and when I get
Yes.
centered, then I'm not in my stress or in my amygdala, those two
Right.
almond
Right.
shaped fight, flight,
Right.
or flee. And then I get out of my ego that I'm not the one to solve this, they are. sometimes you feel like this heavy burden, like I'm sure for you, if you're trying to help a couple, to keep their marriage together, sometimes we feel like it's our responsibility. And at least for me, I sometimes feel, oh my God, I'm responsible to make this peaceful. And then I have to go within and say, you know what? I'm not responsible. I'm only responsible to be a peaceful presence here to help them get where they need to go and ask the right questions. And then it's really their issue. But it's sometimes hard. Our ego gets in the way of our magnificence, wouldn't you say?
um, every lawyer and every minister I know has a big ego.
Well, we
And,
have this, we got into it because we want to help people, or we want to
right,
make things right, or do truth, justice in the American way, or we want
right.
to like bring people to their God center, whatever it is. But so it's not nasty like we're trying to have power, but we are trying to exert control to some extent, right?
We do, and I think it's such an insightful observation when we can stop and just go within. The Old Testament talks about the still small voice.
Yeah.
When I can take the clutter of the world and just push it away for a little while and get in touch with that quiet place in me, that's the source of wisdom.
Yeah.
And
I've been listening to Greg Braden. I don't know if you know who he is. He's amazing. And he talks about all the science. He's really a scientist. And he talks about doing three times. Believe it or not, we're just about to have to stop. But he talks about just putting your hand on your heart and taking 5 seconds in to breathe and 5 seconds out, and do that for a few minutes. And it totally gets you back into your magnificence, as you would say, but gets you more centered. So
I would add to that, make yourself smile while you're doing it.
perfect. Well, that's a great way for us to end, because we are out of time. So I want you to give your website again, and it's time to go.
So my website is www.DrBaryFleet, Dr. Bary Fleet.
Yeah, and Bary
That's
is with
simple.
one R.
Bary
Right.
with one R. It is.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we will stay in touch and have you back again. Okay.
Bary, thank you so much. This has been so delightful.
So fun. Okay.